Hi everyone and welcome. It's Christine here from Ever After Paper Crafts, and today I thought I'd pop on and share a quick card tutorial with you. I've missed doing my card classes and tutorials. I'm still a Stampin' Up! Demonstrator, and while I will continue to be creating junk journals on this channel, I can create cards and card tutorials a little bit faster than I can put out a junk journal. So I thought in between junk journals I could pop on and share a card, a tutorial, or a card class. Or all three. So today I am sharing this beautiful sunflower card that was made with a brand new Stampin' Up! Stamp set called Celebrate Sunflowers. And I'm going to be doing a class on this. In fact, my next video will have all the details about the class that you would need if you're interested. But for today, I'm just going to show you how I went ahead and made this card. We're going to be watercoloring this beautiful image today, although there are many ways that you could color this image. You can watercolor it with Stampin' Up! Inks, like I'm going to show you today. You can watercolor it with Stampin' Up! Watercolor pencils, or you could color it with Stampin' Up! Blends, which are Stampin' Up!'s version of alcohol markers. So lots of different ways you could get this effect. So here's the card, and here's this beautifully colored sunflower. You can see I did put some Wink of Stella there in the middle just to give it some shimmer. But so there you can see the beautiful sunflower and the different watercoloring on the sunflower itself, as well as the leaves. So I'm going to teach you how to do that today, and then how to put this card together. The sentiment is actually on a panel of cardstock that I have punched with another new product from Stampin' Up! Called Pick a Punch, and you get to pick two different, it actually accommodates 6 different sizes of paper and 2 different borders. So I'll show you how that works, and I'll also give you a tip on how to use that punch as well. So let's go ahead and get started. The first thing we want to do is stamp our large sunflower and the leaves. Now I recommend, unless you're doing no line watercoloring, which is a whole different animal in and of itself, and a little bit more difficult, so I'm just going to be showing regular watercoloring today. And so if you're doing regular watercoloring, you want to make sure that you use Stays On ink. That is the watercolor friendly ink that Stampin' Up! Provides. And even if you don't use Stampin' Up! Products, I do recommend any watercoloring to use the Stays On ink. It is fabulous ink and perfect for watercoloring. I'm also using watercolor paper from Stampin' Up! I do recommend that when you're using watercolor paper, it does have 2 sides. One side's a little bit more bumpy than the other, and I do recommend stamping on the bumpier side. So I'm going to go ahead and get out the large sunflower image, as you can see, and I'm using my Stamparatus simply because, as I mentioned, the watercolor paper is bumpy, right? So if I don't get a perfect impression the first time around by using my Stamparatus, I can correct that problem and my paper won't move. So I have the freedom to stamp it again if I need to. So let me bump us out just a little bit so you guys can see what I'm doing. So I just have my watercolor paper in here held down by a magnet, and I have placed the sunflower and one of the, there's only one large leaf stamp, so we'll have to stamp this one twice. But so I have these 2 in on the lid of my Stamparatus, so when I put the ink on them, and I can just stamp them down and they will leave an impression on this watercolor paper. So I'm going to go ahead now and get my Stays On ink, and I'm going to make sure that I ink this sunflower and leaf up really, really well. I have my stamp set box underneath the lid of the Stamparatus just to give it some stability. You could of course take the lid off and just work flat. These panels are removable, see, but I just personally find it easier just to stick something underneath there, give it some stability, go ahead and ink it up, and then just stamp it down. So I think I've got that pretty well inked up. I'm now going to close the lid of the Stamparatus, and I'm going to push pretty hard to make sure that this image gets transferred onto this bumpy, thicker watercolor paper. And now when I lift it, and that's perfect. We actually don't have to stamp it again. When I was playing around on my own with these images and creating different cards for my classes and things like that, a couple times I did have to stamp the image twice. So I thought for the video I would just do it on the Stamparatus just in case I needed to stamp it twice. Now I'm going to move this leaf stamp because remember I have to stamp it twice. I've already left a little impression, but that's okay because my paper's not going to move because it's in my Stamparatus held down by my magnet. All right, so now we have both leaves stamped and our large sunflower. I do have a little bit of black here around the image, and that's just simply because I didn't clean my stamp as well as I should have, but that's all right because we're actually going to die cut with the coordinating dies. We're going to die cut the leaves and sunflower out, so I'm not concerned with that. If you you know, were concerned, you could obviously just go ahead and stamp that again, no big deal. But I did just want to point out, you know, that is a little boo-boo, but it's not a huge deal for me because that is not going to show. I'm going to be die cutting it out. Okay, so now that we have these stamped, what we want to do next is go ahead and do the watercoloring, as you can see here on the finished card. So in order to do that, we need to grab an aqua painter. Now Stampin' Up! Has had aqua painters forever, and so if you have those, you're good to go. You can also use a small paintbrush on a little cup of water if you don't have an aqua painter. I do recommend the aqua painters because what they do is they hold a large amount of water here for you, so you don't have to constantly dip into your water cup. It's all right here in the pen for you. And the Stampin' Up! Just came out with a brand new set of these. So if you have the old ones, you're fine, but I do love these new ones. They have 3 different size tips. We're going to be using the medium tip today because our image isn't huge. I mean, I'm sorry, isn't teeny tiny. It's also not huge. So the medium is just right for that. This is actually the medium one. I apologize. I held up the wrong one there in that little show and tell. This is the medium one, which we're going to use. The one that I accidentally showed you first has the really teeny tiny small tip, which will be perfect for coloring other images, which I'll be sharing in other videos soon. And then this large brush tip is awesome for creating really unique watercolor backgrounds. And I'll be doing some video tutorials on that. So we're just gonna go ahead and use the medium sized. So let me just set that aside. And then you want to grab a piece of paper towel. Now this is one that I've already used and it's dried, so it won't affect what we're doing. So make sure you have some paper towel by your workstation. And now I'm going to be using the inks. So let me go ahead and bring my inks over. For the main color of the sunflower, so for the actual petals of the flower itself, I am using Stampin' Up's Pumpkin Pie and Daffodil Delight. Okay, so we're just going to set those right above here. And what I'm going to do, if you had your Stampin' Up! Refill, you could simply squirt some in the lid of your ink pad and work from there. Or if you don't feel like getting your refill out, just give a big press here, a fairly strong press to the center of your ink pad. Open up your ink pad and you can see we now have a fresh palette of the Daffodil Delight ink. I'm going to do the same thing with the Pumpkin Pie. And I will open that up, and there we go. There's our fresh palette. But again, if you don't want to do the squeezing, grab your ink refill. 1 dot should do it, and you're good to go. Okay, so now I'm going to ready my aqua painter. It already has water in it. And to do that, to fill it up with water, you would simply unscrew, if you're not familiar with aqua painters, you would simply unscrew the entire top and hold it under the faucet, give it a couple squeezes, let it fill up with water, and then screw it back on. Okay, but mine already has water in it, so that part is done. I'm going to give it a squeeze onto my paper towel to release some water. So now the brush tip is wet. And then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to take this into my Daffodil Delight ink, and I am going to color my petals of my sunflower with this gorgeous Daffodil Delight ink. And right now I'm not doing anything super fancy, okay? I'm making sure I have some water in the tip of my brush, and I'm really just getting some ink, or if you want to think of it as paint, since we're watercoloring, you can think of it as paint. I'm really just getting it onto the different petals of my sunflower. I'm not worried about shading right now. I'm just worried about getting a layer of color down on all of these different petals. As you can see, I'm going quite quickly. I'm leaving some white space and really focusing the color where the stamp has already delineated different shading lines. So if you can see these lines in the stamp here, those are kind of indicating for you where your shadow is going to be. So that's where I'm focusing the majority of my ink, but I'm pulling it up too into the rest of the petal. And I'm just leaving some white at the tips of the petals. So basically every petal is going to get hit with this Daffodil Delight ink. just a little bit here and there. And I'm just kind of doing it in a circular painterly motion, nothing fancy about, you don't have to know any special brush tips or anything like that. And I should have mentioned this at the beginning of this video. I am not a watercolorist. I don't know how to watercolor with actual paints. I've done it on cards in the past, but I am not an expert. So this is just how I do it on my cards. So if you know better, ways, please don't think this is the only way you can do it. There are, I'm sure, plenty of ways to do it. This is just the way that I have found that I really like the results of as I've been working on different cards with the stamp set. Okay, so I'm just gonna let this cool cool. I'm not baking the card. I'm going to let this dry for just a moment. You could grab your heat tool if you're in a hurry and go ahead and just dry this layer if you want. I'm not super worried about it being a little bit damp, so I'm going to go ahead and clean off my aqua painter because it has some of that Daffodil Delight on the tip, and to do that you just squeeze it again onto your paper towel and blot it back and forth until no more color comes off of the tip of your aqua painter. Now I'm ready to go into my other color, and my darker color is the pumpkin pie. Let me bring this up again to show you the finished card here. And you can see I concentrated that pumpkin pie again where those lines are. So what I'm going to do is just dip my aqua painter brush into some of this pumpkin pie, and I'm just going to lay it down. Again, no right or wrong here. There really isn't. I just kind of think of the lines that the stamp has already created as guidelines for me, where to put my, my darkest color, my shading, that kind of thing. So that's what I'm gonna do. But it really looks beautiful no matter how you color this thing. The stamp is so beautiful. And as a demonstrator, we got to kind of look at these some certain products from the catalog we could pre-order as a demonstrator, and this was top of my list. Love sunflowers, and then this stamp set was just so beautiful. So now I'm going to the little the little petals rather behind, and just adding a little bit of this pumpkin pie. Now notice I'm not putting a whole bunch, especially in these smaller petals to the sunflower. I am just putting a little bit of this darker color, and this is what's going to give us, once this card comes together, this is what's going to give us that shaded look. So it's going to look like we have, bright colors and light colors all in the same image. It's going to make it look, I guess, painterly, for lack of a better word. It's going to look watercolored, in other words. We're going to look like we know what we're doing here. In terms of watercoloring. It's a really easy technique and super fun. So as you can see, again, I'm not using any special, brush stroke or anything like that. I'm just laying some of this color down. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to get the pumpkin pie off of the tip of my aqua painter by, again, just squeezing some water and then blotting my tip on this paper towel until no more orange color comes off. Now I'm going to go back into my Daffodil Delight, but you can see it's getting a little bit, I've used most of the ink, so I'm going to squeeze again and freshen up my little palette there. See, now I have another fresh palette. And I'm going to come back in and grab some Daffodil Delight, and I'm going to mix that with my pumpkin pie that I've just laid down. So all I'm doing right now is going back over just the part where I have placed the pumpkin pie. And I am doing this really quickly for the purposes of this video, otherwise we might, we could be here a while. So if you're doing this on your own, you can take your time. Watercoloring this way is incredibly forgiving. I have found, even if I've dried something and then I find that I don't like it, I can come back in and fix it. Just wet the paper again and put some more color on the tip of my aqua painter, and I am good to go. So, you can definitely take your time in putting the color down. But for this video, I just want to kind of give you just a basic knowledge of how to do this with Stampin' Up! Products. Hopefully this will be enough where you guys can just go have fun on your own. I always feel like a painter when I do this, even though I can't do that, but it makes me feel like very artistic when I use this technique, and I just love it. So now you can see I have blended, let me pull this up, I have blended the orange or the pumpkin pie with the yellow, the Daffodil Delight. And so I still have some white spaces. So what I'm gonna do now is squeeze my brush one more time onto my paper towel so the tip is clear and doesn't have that color on it. And then I'm just going to pull the color to the tops of the petals. So that way there's color on everything, but some of the tops of the petals are going to be the lightest color. And so therefore it's going to look very shaded and three-dimensional and almost pop off the page. That's my goal anyway. So let's go ahead and give this one more squeeze to get the color off the tip. And now with just water and no color on the tip of my aqua painter, notice I didn't dip it into you know, any inks. I'm just sort of pulling the color and covering all the remaining white spots to the petals just by pulling that color up. I hope that makes sense, and then hopefully by me trying to explain it and then you guys watching me do it, I hope that that makes sense. If you guys ever have any questions about anything here on my YouTube channel, I always have my email in the description of the video, and I also have a blog for my Stampin' Up products, which or my Stampin' Up projects rather, which I will link below, where I also kind of, with, you know, typewritten words, describe my process. And then you can also just leave a comment in the description, or I'm sorry, in the comment section below. Apparently I can't paint and talk at the same time. But anyway, you can also leave me a comment if you have any questions about anything that I share on this YouTube channel. I want to be accessible to everyone and available to answer any questions you guys might have. Okay, so I'm just kind of going around. Sometimes I might dip back into the Daffodil Delight just a little bit for some of the petals that maybe don't have as much ink to pull up to cover all the white spaces, and that's okay to do. I also like to kind of just iron out the blending, make sure there's a nice transition between the darker colors and the lighter. All right, and so this looks good to me. So this is our finished petals there on our sunflower. I'm going to give this a squeeze again to clean off my brush, and now I just want to show you I've made a couple mistakes, which undoubtedly you will probably do if you're anything like me and doing this quickly. So notice how there's a little tiny bit of ink that has come off this petal here. Super easy to do. You have your aqua painter with just water on the tip. Just take the aqua painter and go run it over that ink. Take your paper towel and blot it, and it's gone like magic. It erases it, literally. So that's what I mean when I say watercolor is incredibly forgiving, or at least doing it this way is incredibly forgiving, because you can go in and just correct any problems, just erase it right up. See, I did it there too. So we're good to go now. So we have done our petals of our sunflower. I'm going to go ahead and let that dry. I'm not going to do the center of the sunflower right away. I'm going to come over and do the leaves next, just so this can be drying. So for my leaves, I used two different colors. My light is the granny apple green, and my darker color is the garden green. One thing I also wanted to mention, if you don't have a whole lot of ink colors, you can do this technique with just one color. Let me walk you through how you would do that. So let's say you just have the garden green. Now I just went ahead and squeezed it to get some fresh ink there in the lid. All right, so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go ahead and dip this in, my aqua painter into the ink, and I am just going to color the whole thing with the garden green, okay? So just like we did with the, I'm gonna leave a little bit of white at the edges, but basically color the whole thing. You might wanna let it dry for just a second. I'm gonna come over here and do the same thing to this petal, or this leaf rather, while this one's just drying for a split second. Now, pretending for a minute that we only have this one color of green, this one shade of green, how can we get different layers here to make this look a little bit more three-dimensional? So you would just come in and you would just come back with your ink again, the same color if you only have the one color, and you would just, wherever you want it shaded, I'm going to shade mine in the middle, just go ahead and shade it and then pull the color out. So you just keep adding the same color until you're satisfied. So that is a trick if you just have, you know, one shade of green. But if you have two, which you can do, I'm now gonna squeeze my garden green to get some ink to transfer to the lid, and I'm gonna show you what it looks like with two colors now. So I'm gonna come in and I'm going to really get the center part where these lines are nice and thick with the garden green ink. I'm gonna do the same thing over here with this particular leaf over here. Then I'm going to give it a squeeze to clean off my aqua painter, come back into the lighter shade and do the same thing, like the same exact technique that we did with the petals of the sunflower. Just kind of blend those two colors together When you're happy with that, squeeze your aqua painter one more time, clean it off, and then finish just pulling the color out so that there's color on all parts of the leaf, but you have some nice shading. If you have to dip back into the lighter shade a little bit, that's totally fine. And we're just pulling this color out. So now you have some nice shaded little leaves there. So I'm going to go ahead and clean my aqua painter one more time, and now we're going to do the center of our sunflower. I did use 2 colors for that as well, but remember you can use just one if you like. I used crumb cake and soft suede. So I'm going to go ahead and squeeze my soft suede, open that up, and now I'll do the same. I'm sorry, that's the crumb cake, and now I'm going to do the same thing with the soft suede. And we really don't need to do a lot of work here. The center is already nicely defined for us in terms of, you know, where our shading is going to be and that sort of thing. So I'm just coloring the whole thing first with my crumb cake, like so. Nothing special about this at all. And then I'm just going to come in. I'm going to clean my brush really quick. Come in with the soft suede and just put some color down along a couple of the edges here and in the center. You know, and that just gives it, look at how beautiful that is. That just gives it a nice shaded look all the way around. So we are done watercoloring. I'm cleaning off my brush for good. Make sure before you put that away, you've squeezed it and gotten all the ink off the tip of your brush. And then we can close up our ink pads, and now we can put our card together. So here are our finished colorings. What we were going to do next is we're going to go ahead and grab the sunflower dies and cut these out. Now, of course, if you don't have the dies and you just have the stamp set, you can easily cut around this. And I actually did that on this card just to show you how easy this image is to fussy cut. But on this one, we're going to go ahead and die cut it. I already die cut it off camera, a different one that I colored, but I did want to show you the dies really quickly. You get a lot of really nice dies in this set. And of course, if you buy the stamp set and the dies together as a bundle, you do save money on that. So that's a definite benefit to buying them together. So these are all the dies that you get. You get this nice overlay die as well, which I'll be using in my class. And then some fun little filigree dies over here, some extra leaf dies. So you get some really nice dies in this set. All you would do is go ahead and find your sunflower die and line it up on top of your image that you've cut. It's very easy to line up. What I do is I look at the back of the image and I see here I've got sort of a long line and then a short one. So I just kind of look around and see where do I see that on the stamp, and I actually see it right here. So you would just simply line it up, and then I use like a little piece of removable tape to tape it down and run it through your Big Shot, and then it comes out. And you do the same thing with your leaves, okay? So that is easy enough, right? Just going ahead and cutting those out. So like I said, I already did this off camera, so I'll go ahead and pull over what I have cut out already, and then we can finish our card. All right, so going to go ahead and set this here. So this is what we just colored together on camera. And these are what I have colored off camera and then gone ahead and I can't find the words, die cut with my Big Shot off screen. Okay, so we'll work with these to complete the card while this dries, and then I can use this on another card in the future. So I'm just going to set that aside. Now, to create this card, it's just a standard A2 size card, which is 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. So if you take an 8 1/2 by 11 sheet of cardstock, in this case I used the thick Whisper White cardstock, and I cut it at 4 1/2, and then I scored it at, I cut it at 4 1/4, and then I scored it at 5 1/2 to create my card base. All right, so that's the card base of the card. Next, I took a piece of Early Espresso cardstock and I cut this at 4 by 5 1/4. And then I took a piece of Daffodil Delight and cut this at 3 3/4 by 5. I then ran this through my Big Shot using the subtle embossing folder from Stampin' Up. And it's very difficult to see because it's subtle. So it's an aptly named embossing folder, but it's really beautiful and adds just a little bit of texture. So sometimes when I'm not using design paper or anything, but I just want a little something extra on my card base, I'll grab that subtle embossing folder because it's just perfection. I love it. Look, I'm so glad it stayed in the catalog. I hope that one never retires. If I had it my way, it would never retire because I love it. So anyway, I'm going to go ahead and just adhere my Daffodil Delight to my early espresso cardstock. Just center it there. Easy peasy. Now I'm not going to adhere this to the card base just yet because I want to add this twine, if you can see in the finished card there. That is super easy to do. I'm just using Stampin' Up's linen thread, and I'm going to grab some Scotch tape just to show you a quick little trick. So I want to wrap this linen thread around about almost at the bottom, not quite at the bottom of the card, maybe a quarter of the way up. So I'm just going to wrap this linen thread around 3 times. And I like to kind of, I don't like how I just did that. Hold on, let me try again. I like to just sort of splay it out a little bit so it has different, kind of like a little pattern to it. So if you see how I did that there, okay? And so then I'm gonna turn it over. I'm going to give it a little snip on the back just to cut it from the packaging there. And then I'm just gonna use some Scotch tape to tape it down. Just kind of a good trick just to get those ends down. You can also use regular adhesive if you want to, but I find that I have to fiddle with that a little bit more than I'd like, so Scotch tape tends to work really well for me. And so just tape those ends down. It really does not create a whole lot of bulk to the back of your card, so that's why I like to use the Scotch tape. Although I'm not super, I don't think I pulled it tight enough, so let me just fix this. Sometimes if you don't pull the twine tight enough, it'll kind of almost, what's the word I'm looking for? Almost kind of like sag on your card. So you want to make sure that you pull it tight. So I'm just going to do this one more time here and make sure that I have pulled it super tight along the back. But let me get it how I want it to look first, and then I'll pull it tight. Okay, there we go. So that's how I want it to look, and then we'll just pull it really tight, and we'll bring our tape back in, and this should do it this time. Fingers crossed here. Okay, that looks fine. So we're going to cover most of the twine up anyway, so it doesn't have to be, absolutely perfect, but I did want it to look nice. Okay, the next thing we want to do is go ahead and adhere this to your note card, your card base. Okay, so I'm just going to take my adhesive, just get this nice and sticky on the back, and then center it on the front of your card base. Okay. There we go. Okay. So you can probably see how it's coming together. So this is going to go down like this. Okay, like that. And so I just used dimensionals for that to get the sunflower stuck down. Before we do that though, let's do the sentiment. So the sentiment, I think I mentioned at the beginning of this video, I used the new Pick-a-Punch from Stampin' Up. So this punch allows you to create 6 different sizes of edges and 2 different designs, if you will. And so what your sizes are is a 1/2 inch, 3/4 inch, and 1 inch. So on each side, okay? So those are the different sizes that you can make. On this one, I created this beautiful border here, as you can see, and I decided to leave it flat or straight on this edge. For the card we're making now, I'm going to go ahead and punch both ends just to show you. So let me give you a tip real quick on how to use this punch. Let me bring the stamp set back over and show you the greeting we're going to use. I'm just going to use this greeting that says thanks a bunch. So I'm going to grab my ruler, and what you want to do is you want to go ahead and measure the length and width of the sentiment. So here's my sentiment. I just pulled it out of the stamp case before coming on video. So the length of my greeting is 2 3/4 inch long, and it is about, it's a little over a 1/2 inch wide. we know that the punch does 1/2 inch, 3/4 of an inch, and 1 inch in width. So we want our cardstock to be the 3/4 of an inch in width because this was a little over 1/2. So if we do 3/4, we'll be fine. Now, how do you know how long to make your sentiment panel, given that you have this punch that's going to be taking some real estate off the ends of your cardstock? So you measure the length, and again, we did that, and that was about 2 3/4. Okay, so you want to make your cardstock 1/2 inch longer than what it actually is. So in other words, I have cut my Daffodil Delight cardstock to 3 1/4. So my sentiment is 2 3/4, and my cardstock is 3 1/4. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead now, and I'm going to use on this one, this punch, this decoration here, this side. So what you want to do is stick it through. Again, we're at the 3/4, so it's going to go in that track. You just stick it through. Now, before you punch down, you want to turn it over, and you want to make sure that it is centered in the back. Sometimes it can get a little wonky when you put it through, even if you stay in the track. So you just want to always flip it over and just make sure that it is good to go. It is. I'm going to punch it down, and you can see the beautiful edge that we get. Now I'm going to do the same thing on the other side of the cardstock. So I have it, whoops, I have it in the track here. Then I'm going to flip it over and just make sure that it is nice and centered. It is. And I'm going to punch it down. So now you can see our beautiful punch. Isn't that beautiful? And now we know that our sentiment is going to fit just fine. And let me show you. I'm going to grab my acrylic block. I didn't get it straight on the block here. Let's see. Let's straighten it on our block a little bit. You could use your Stamparatus for this too if you prefer. I'm just going to go ahead and ink this up quickly with my block. I'm going to use Early Espresso ink to match my cardstock. So I'm just going to ink this up, check it, make sure I have nice coverage of ink on my sentiment, and then I'm just going to center my sentiment in the middle of this piece of cardstock that we have already punched, and you will see in just a second that it is going to fit. Just great. See? Perfect. So I probably have it a little bit, tiny bit crooked more crooked than I would like, because I didn't want to put my head over the image to stamp it down perfectly, because then you just see in the video camera my head. But I think you guys get the idea. So if you're looking right at it and punching down, it's going to punch, or stamping down, it's going to stamp perfectly. Again, mine's a tiny little bit crooked. You probably can't even notice it on camera, and I'm pointing out a flaw too, which I probably shouldn't do, but it's a little crooked for my taste. But again, that's just because my head wasn't right over blocking your view. Okay, so now we want to do the same thing on our larger piece of cardstock. Now, if you want to layer cardstock underneath, you want to cut it 1/4 of an inch wider than this. So this will be 1 inch, okay? And then 1/4 of an inch longer. So this one was 3 1/4. This is cut to 3 1/2 inches long by 1 inch wide. And I decided this time to use the other side, just so you guys could see what each design looks like. So I'm in the inch-long track now. I'm going to stick it in, and I'm going to turn it over, make sure that we're nice and centered, and then I'm going to give it a punch. I'm going to do the same thing now. Let me show you first. Isn't that lovely? I love that. And what's great is you can mix these designs up too, like I'm doing right now. You don't have to always stay with the same designs. Now I'm in my track. I'm going to flip it over. It did get a little bit wonky, so I'm going to center it. Wait a minute. There we go. Okay, now it's nice and centered, and give it a punch. And here's our beautiful design. You can see the edges there, and then this will just go right on top. And you have a very nice edge there. Love this punch. So let's go ahead and close this up, and let's go ahead and finish this card really quick. Let me grab my dimensionals. So I'm going to grab my glue dots and my dimensionals to finish off this card. The first thing that I'm going to do is adhere the leaves to the back of the sunflower. And the way I'm going to do that is just grab my little glue dot roll, and put a glue dot on the front of our colored leaf that we've die cut. And then I'm just going to stick that, oh, it really doesn't matter where. I'm just sort of eyeballing it, you know, there, and I'll have one up here-ish. Okay, so that's kind of where I'm going with this. But you know, you can play with it, figure out where you'd like it to go. I'm going to do the same thing with the other leaf. Just grab a glue dot there, transfer it to the front of the leaf, and then put it, again, just kind of guessing and eyeballing, and I think that's going to work, and it will. So now I'm going to grab my dimensionals because I want this to have a little bit of dimension to it. And I'm just going to put a bunch of dimensionals on the back of this sunflower. Remove the backings. Like so. And then I'm just going to center this right on this linen thread here that we have. So it's just, the linen thread's just going to peek out a little bit of the sides. Now what we want to do is we want to adhere our sentiment to its little shadow behind it. So we'll go ahead and do that with just some regular adhesive. There we go. I just think that's such a nice look, and how you can mix and match it too with the other design. I really like that look, but I don't have it centered like I like it. So let me just fix it here. Let me see, is that good? No. Of course, I can't center anything today because the video camera is on. Figures, huh? Okay, there we go. So that's about where I want it. All right, so let me just add a little bit more adhesive to that. There we go. Now we're going to add some dimensionals to the back of this as well so that our sentiment pops a bit. Just about 4 dimensionals there, and we will lift the backings up. All right, and here we go. And we'll just put this right on top here, like so. There we go. And so just for a finishing touch, I went ahead and added some of these champagne rhinestone basic jewels. So I added 5 of them. So we'll just go ahead and add these. There's no right or wrong way to add these. I think they just add a little bit of sparkle and fun to your projects. So if there's an opportunity to add these or the pearls or the white rhinestones or anything like that, you're going to probably see them on a card of mine. I just think that they're fun. All right, and so that is it, guys. That is, I know this is a pretty long video, but I did want to show you in detail how to do that watercoloring and then how to use that new Pick-a-Punch. All right, so there is our finished card. What a difference that punch makes too. So you can see it both ways. Here I've used the same design on both the back piece and the front piece, left this piece straight. This was my original card. And then in this one, we have it done using both sides are punched, and they're the 2 different designs. So really cool, really like how that came out. So I hope that you enjoyed this video. Thank you guys so much as always for stopping by. I will have a link in the description box of this video to all the products used if you're interested, as well as to my blog with some more information. And check back soon because I will have an announcement about a class using this stamp and die set. Thanks so much again for stopping by. I'll catch you in the next video. Bye-bye.